Welcome home, brave heroes. I'm Ash, this is AshQuest, and we've got the ultra-wide lens on today, so pardon any aberrations of perspective, because we are going to be looking at Dungeons of the Oak Dell from Two Acorn Games. And Dungeons of the Oak Dell is a dungeon-crawling roll-and-write standalone sequel to Villagers of the Oak Dell, and it's inspired by old-school PC classics such as Dungeon Master, Eye of the Beholder, and Grimrock. Now, don't let the standalone sequel statement put you off at all. I had no idea about anything of Villagers of the Oak Dell. You don't either, in order to be able to enjoy this dungeon crawler, which is suitable for 1 to 4 players. It is very soloable. And I was very kindly sent this lovely prototype edition ahead of the official Kickstarter campaign, which of course I will be linking in the description below. So please go check that out, and we'll go over all of the stuff that this charming dungeon crawler has to offer. So, a bit of lore. After settling in Oak Dell, the villagers began exploring the surrounding area and the nearby mountains. There they discovered mysterious dungeons filled with dangers and treasures. Delve into the depths of various dungeons to uncover their secrets. Complete quests and slay monsters with a unique and innovative fighting mechanic that lets you feel every hit. Each monster has its own special abilities, presenting a different puzzle to solve. Choose a hero class, develop your skills, and prepare to confront terrifying bosses. Target specific body parts to defeat them faster or disable some of their abilities. Navigate through the dungeon and fulfill your quest, or fail miserably and stay there forever. So, what you're looking at here is very much in between what I'm going to assume the most accessible tier of the campaign, which is very much going to be a print and play experience. And this, as a solo adventure or multiplayer adventure, is very accessible as a print and play. Everything you're going to get inside the box is going to make perfect sense with that statement. The higher end will actually come with presumably quite a bit more than this, because the Kickstarter campaign will be adding rewards and the game is technically still in development. So they're still adding stuff to this, and I'll read you a little bit more on that after we open the box. So a huge thank you to Michael at Two Acorn Games, and just Two Acorn Games in general, for sending me this. I've already unboxed this, I've learned to play, I've played, and it is a lovely experience. It is automatically really high in my list of solo dungeon crawlers. Now, just one thing I wanted to point out before I put the box lid away. We've got this really fun dual acorn symbol on the back of our hero here on the box art. So the first thing that we're going to find is a letter, and I think that this is really intended for people who are getting the message out early, but I think it's going to apply to a lot of you guys as well. So I'm going to read you those parts. We are very proud of what we have created so far, especially the combat mechanics, but please keep in mind that the game you received is not a complete product, and we expect to add a lot of content during the Kickstarter campaign. In addition to the solo mode based on the roguelite system, we plan to add many different monsters, heroes, and more. As with our previous campaign, we will be running contests and collecting feedback from the community, which may lead to even more interesting solutions. Of course, if you have any feedback, we would love to hear it, as we value your opinion. Signed in real ink. Couple of really great guys. Okay, and the first thing we get is a set of printed instructions, very run-of-the-mill, just printed off the printer, and this should set the tone for the kind of game that we're going to be experiencing if we get the print and play version. The rules here seem like a bit, but they're very easy to take in. There are about 12 pages of rules, but I have to say, what I learned in those 12 pages was very easy to learn, and it was very intuitive. There were a couple of small hiccups here and there, but going back through and referencing stuff really nailed in the concepts and helped me get back on track. So really well done job on the rules, guys. And I will say ahead of time, the setup for this game is very elegant, it's fast, it's easy to play as a solitaire game when you just need to let off some steam, or if you're just in the mood to play a quick dungeon crawler game solo. I'm gonna go out and say something brave and controversial here. The setup for this game is much better, heads and shoulders above, than Tiny Epic Quest, which is another game that I learned to play recently, and the setup for that game is just abysmal. So the first thing we see is the dice sheet, and it's printed on really high quality paper, cardstock, glossy. A lot of the stuff that we're going to be seeing is pretty glossy because it's going to be intended to be used with dry erase markers. So very much a write it out or erase it. And if you get the print and play version, I imagine it's going to be just as easy to print off temporary sheets to fill in circles and erase them and such. First thing out of this box I want to show you are the character sheets. Of course, they are laminated. We're going to be dry erase markering all over them as well. And there are 4 distinctly different heroes. They are actually quite similar in terms of abilities and health and their skill tracks. They've all got identical item sheets for their inventories because that should be identical, but their skill tracks do differ just ever so slightly with what specialty skills each one is able to acquire at different skill levels, and the skill tracks we'll go into in a little more detail. The equipment that they are able to get is a little different and will provide them with different bonuses. So for our warrior here, they don't seem to have preset names. I'm just calling this guy the warrior, and I'm selecting him because he looks the most like me in real life. Has a bonus if you're able to acquire his helmet, which has its own stat increases, its own properties, and his chest armor, which has its own properties. Get these 2 things together and you'll be able to get a bonus that fills in 2 of your circles on your defense skill track. Now, this doesn't acquire a bonus for you just by getting any 2 pieces of gear. For example, if you get the boots down here and you get the shield, there's nothing connecting them, so you wouldn't get a bonus in that case. But if you get the sword and the shield for this particular character, those have a track that links them, and it allows you to get 2 additional damage stat bonuses or skill bonuses. So all of the characters have a little bit of variation in that. And it's worth noting that for some reason, these sheets are double-sided, but they are different characters on the opposite side. So if the warrior's on this side and I flip it, we have a different warrior, a roguish fighter or some such on the other side. And that's already a character sheet that we have, so this may be able to facilitate a game where there's 4 players, but 2 of them would like to be the same character. Anyways, setting that aside for now, the game comes with these dungeon sheets, also laminated because we are going to be drawing our path from the very beginning of the dungeon through the 3 difficulty levels till we get to the boss and can slay the boss and get the treasure and win the game. There are a lot of symbols in the dungeon, from torches that we can pick up to debuff the enemies during combat, to different potions that we will be able to add to our inventory and use in our different phases for each turn, to well springs that will heal us, to keys that will allow us to unlock doors and get additional treasure during our journey. There are 2 different dungeon layouts that come in 4 cards each, so the handout can be given to everybody and they can play the same dungeon at once. There is an easy mode of the dungeon and a more difficult mode of the dungeon on the reverse side of the cards. Important to note, although I did miss this detail when I was initially learning to play, there are 3 different levels indicated by the color of the tiles of the dungeon. Now, I initially thought that these were the same color and this was a different color. But there are actually 3 different colors here. We have a beige, a sort of slightly darker beige, and a pink. And that's levels 1, 2, and 3. And where you are in the dungeon at the end of the movement phase determines what level monster you'll be fighting. There are different effects as well to your character if you are walking over a trap versus stopping on a trap, in which you will take no damage because it is assumed your character will be dealing with that trap and trying to disarm it rather than getting caught in it on their way past it. You can walk over torches and potions to pick them up and add them to your sheet. And you've even got special skills that will allow you to just burst through doors without needing a key. Enough about the dungeon sheets. Let's look at the monsters. We've got 4 different categories here, levels 1, 2, and 3, and then we have boss monsters. I'll show you those in just a second. We've got this lovely acorn tile. This is actually the first player token, so keep this handy. It's not just a souvenir, although it does add a branded charm to the game overall. Any guesses about how the dice sheet works just yet? Well, this game comes with 12 dice, 6 white and 6 black. And this is very much a roll and draft dice kind of game. And the amount of dice that you'll use in a game depends on how many players there are. Since we're going to be playing a single player game, we'll take 3 of the white dice and 3 of the black dice. We'll set those aside for our setup phase. We also have 4 more dry erase markers, 1 for each player, and they all have this awesome sword handle hilt base. These are 3D printed. I don't know if by print and play they're actually going to be providing the STL files to print these yourselves, or if this will just be for the prototype, or if they're going to mass produce these some way. Either way, I thought this was a really cool and charming detail, and it was just really cool to see the dry erase markers in these sword hilts. It just adds a ton of charm and flavor to the game, so I hope that this is an element that stays. Next up, we have our acorn shields, one for each player. Please let me know what you think this is for before the reveal. These are 3D printed as well. Again, not sure if they're going to be providing STL files so you can do this yourself, or if they'll find some other way to include these with the higher tiers of the pledge. But if you don't get the higher tiers and you do go with a print and play, this is something that you can substitute, so that's your hint for now. Oh, and finally, and I really thought this was worth pointing out, this entire tray looks like a standard gaming component tray, but it is entirely 3D printed. How cool is that? This is the first time I've seen something like this 3D printed with FDM, and it is awesome. It seems like a perfect way to get this out into the hands of somebody. It's actually very durable. I'm thoroughly impressed. Yeah, we print off our organizers and our card holders and everything for our dungeon crawler board games, but I never thought to print off an entire tray in like one section or two sections, as is the case with this. So we've looked at all of the elements. I'd like to show you the monster cards now and get into a little bit of the combat. I just showed you one of the bosses who looks like Nosferatu. He's amazing. We'll look at one of the level 1 monsters in detail, since this is the monster that is called out in the tutorial for the game, and these will be monsters that you pretty much draw at random when you are starting your adventure. They're not set in any particular order. The only order there is as you're progressing, you'll encounter level 1 monsters, level 2, level 3, and the boss. So this is the ghost monster, and there's a lot of information on this card to take note of, but we'll break it down very simply. In the top left corner, you have the monster's level, which of course you can reference on the back of the card. In the upper right, you have the condition for the monster to end combat and run away, and the effects of the monster running away. We'll get back to this in just a second. You get a symbol that basically explains to you during the monster phase, any torches will decrease the monster's die result, whether it's black or white, by 2. And then there is a table underneath a symbol for a white die and underneath a symbol for a black die. So if you rolled a white die and drafted it, the monster actions will follow under the white die. If you drafted a black die, then for the monster combat phase, the actions will follow down for the black die. In other words, if the value of the die was between 3 and 4 and you drafted a black die, this monster is going to do 2 damage to your hero, 2 wounds. So really just the monster AI. There could be special skills down here that are lined out, or special instructions on what happens if you wound the monster in certain ways. In the bottom right, we have the monster's total wounds, and we have the reward for defeating the monster. In this case, it's a skill point. It can be one of 3 different things. In the center, we have the illustration of the monster on a beautiful dungeon backdrop, and I just want to say I'm really happy that these monsters look so down to earth and illustrated innocently. It's just very simple line art with some coloring. Just want to show you another example of this mimic. This is really great grassroots art, and it adds such a huge, immense amount of charm to the game, and I'm so glad that it has this instead of soulless generated AI graphics. So we have different elements to note here, but to break it down simply, we have colored dots all around the monster. There's symbols inside of these dots to give them a little bit more visual distinction, but ultimately it's the color of the dot that matters. And these dots represent lines, or the origin of lines that you're going to draw through the monster or through symbols that are on this monster sheet. And your lines always have to begin and end on one of these dots. And the die that you draft for your combat phase will actually determine what color you can start on, but you can draw to any other color. That's inconsequential. What really matters is if you strike the monster more than once and you have lines that intersect on the body of the monster. That is what will cause damage to the monster. And the more lines that intersect in a single swipe, the more damage you'll be able to do to the monster in a single turn. If your line goes over any of the symbols that are around the monster, you'll pick those up. We've got skill point symbols, the 3 different types, and we have a key. And this is how you collect keys in the game. You fight monsters and you try to collect the key as you're slicing through the enemy. Okay, we're going to set up our game. And to do that, it's very simple. We've got our dice sheet. We go ahead and we separate our enemy decks, which are already pretty clearly lined out for us. along the top here, 1, 2, 3, and boss. We've got our draft dice. We'll set those aside for now, but in a different spot because they were just in my way. We'll choose a dungeon, so we'll just go ahead and choose this one. And the little boy wearing the acorn helmet signifies that this is a dungeon that has more time in it, so it's an easier experience. That goes there. The monster card, we'll pretend we've just drawn this, and this is what we've got, and it will go right here under the dungeon card. And then we're selecting our hero, and he's going to go right here. And that, my friends, is it for the setup. For each additional player, they'll set up around the table, here, over yonder, and the more players are playing, the more dice you will be drafting. We won't need the first player, Acorn, because we're the only player. We'll roll our 6 dice, our 3 white and 3 black. Love to do that. And we'll take the results of these dice and we'll place them on their spots, ordered by number of pips on the die face. So we've got a 2 on this white die that's going to go nowhere else but right here, the 2 here on this section of the die sheet. We've got a 3, we've got a 1, we've got a 1, we've got a 5, we've got a 6. And of course, if this had ended up being a 6, it would share the spot over here. Or if this had ended up being a 3, it would share the spot with this 3. We would have 2 dice of 3s to pick from. Okay, white dice on the top, black dice on the bottom. And each section has its own collection of symbols, and they all mean something. So we're just going to select this 3, for example, this 3 die. The 3 on the face now no longer matters. It's not 3 anything. It was only used to assign its value to this sheet. But this particular die will offer you a movement of 1 square, that's a boot symbol, through the dungeon, so 1 tile. So we'll be able to take our dry erase marker, and we'll start at the very beginning and we'll advance 1 tile into the dungeon. It also offers us the ability to start at a blue dot on the monster card during combat. And then when the monster attacks back, they will attack using the values of the white die instructions. So we will go into combat with this monster, and we can start from either this blue dot or this blue dot. And if I start from this blue dot, I can draw to any other line that I want, trying to pick up symbols and attacking the monster at the same time, or I can start from this blue dot. And the rules are the exact same. Now, the rules do say that you are not allowed to use anything to see if your shot would line up with one of the symbols or a particular part of the monster body, but I think that it's so easy to see this anyway that I think they could abolish this rule and it would be fine. And actually, one of the potions that you get at the game's beginning, you start out with a potion of focus. This potion actually allows you to use a ruler or something to line up your shot and see if it would get, but I just don't see the purpose of that because it is really easy to visually see what's going to hit and what's going to collect what symbol. And was your guess correct about the shield? Because now I can finally reveal to you that this is used to keep your lines straight. So for example, if I'm starting at this blue section here, I could go ahead and grab this skill point for this if I line the shot up from here to the green, but I won't hit the monster at all and I won't be causing any intersecting lines, so I probably don't want to do that. I'm doing something I'm not allowed to do by doing this. I guess I'll use my potion of focus just to make sure I'm playing by the rules, and to use that we just fill that in. These dotted lines around our circles here indicate that we don't have it, but we've got room to get it. So if I pick up another potion of focus while I'm running around the dungeon, I'll just fill this in. And now it's easy to see that I have one. And when I use it, I'll fill that in, and it's easy to see that I've used one. The same thing goes for all of this other stuff that we can collect. I have the ability to use this skill once during my phase, the combat phase. But if I get more of these skills by fighting monsters, then I'll be able to fill these in, and you can see that I'll have more available to me. Now these do connect to the special skills on the card, and they're already circled around, which means we will immediately get them. Of course, we can immediately use them, and that means we won't be able to get them again, not until we have collected enough skills to get to the next one that we've unlocked. You don't have to use skills previously on a skill track to use the more advanced ones. So let's say I've gone this entire time being able to collect these skill points and I haven't needed to use any of them. And I finally get to where I can use the +3 and I've made it to the boss. Well, I can use this +3 additional damage skill. I don't have to have used all the ones prior to that. If I want to, I can, but you don't have to. Okay, that's just one of the skill types. This allows you to inflict additional damage. This skill track in the middle for this character allows us to, any guesses on what that's a picture of? Kind of looks like a squid, right? Or a fireball flying through the air. Nope, this is a dot with multiple lines coming out of it. Now, when you begin playing, you're only allowed to draw lines from one end to the other, and that's not a straight line, and you really should use this to line up your shot after you've committed to your drawing. But anyway, well, let's say that I have attacked this monster multiple times over the course of many turns. We'll say, for argument's sake, that the first thing I did was I attacked from a blue dot, and I chose to go from blue to orange. Okay, I didn't collect any symbols, and I haven't done any damage to the monster yet. But let's say on my next turn, I drafted this orange die, which could very well be different because we would be rolling new dice on the next turn. But for the sake of argument, I drafted this orange die, and now I'm going to go from orange to yellow, and I will be picking up this additional damage bonus skill point. I will also have created, an intersection on the monster, so I've dealt a damage to the monster. Now, going forward, I'm not going to be able to use any of these points unless I use an additional skill. That's this skill. And that's what that's a picture of. It's one of the dots with multiple lines coming out. I can use this skill if I have it. I can fill it in, and now when I draw my line from a color that the drafted die instructed me that I could use, I can go from a point that I've already used or to a point that I've already used. Now, you can do that if it's advantageous to do so, but I wouldn't just do it willy-nilly for no reason. Instead, if I were able to draft this orange die, I would go from this point to this point, and then I would be able to pass through two of my lines, which, what do you think that does? It inflicts 2 points of damage on the monster if the points are on the monster. However, I've made a mistake. This intersection occurs just off the monster's body. This one occurs on. So again, it's only 1 point of damage to this monster. Very clever, very, very clever of them to have this art kind of maneuver the monster out of the way of certain combinations. So it looks like you're going to get your bonus attack in, and then you don't. Anyway, we can start to talk a little bit about the monster running away conditions now. This symbol means when there are no more combinations of dots left, when there are no more free dots of any color left to draw lines to or from, then the monster's remaining health will convert to damage to you and the monster will run away. In other words, if I used up all of my lines over the course of 6 turns and I did not manage to kill this monster, which you might think it's impossible to do, but it's not impossible. You can definitely have a lot of intersecting lines, but they won't all fall on the actual monster image itself, which means no damage to the monster. Then whatever health the monster had left, let's say he had 6 points of health left, that's going to convert to 6 damage to my hero. The monster runs away and I'll get a new monster in the coming phase on my next turn. That leads us to how to deal damage to your hero. You will fill in the broken heart spots. If that's 6 damage, I've got 1 health left. Once this broken heart spot on my card is filled in, the amount of broken hearts is equal to the amount of hearts, and my hero is dead. There is an additional healing mechanic that is included as an optional rules as written for you if you want to play a bit of an easier game, and it applies all through the dungeon until you get to the boss. So you can heal yourselves up basically just by skipping a turn until you get to the boss. And then if you die at the boss, well, you are dead. But you can also get more hearts on your sheet. You can actually get quite a few of them. So you'll fill in the hearts if you do get additional hearts from things like water fountains. And if I were to then get this damage, then I wouldn't be dead yet. I'd still have 4 more hearts. And yes, this can bleed over onto the second line. After you have picked up a die off of the dice sheet and you have gone through all of the steps, all of the phases, you'll place this die on your character sheet right here in one of these 3 spots. And once all 3 of these are filled up, never mind the number on the die, that doesn't matter. That means an hourglass has passed. And once an hourglass has passed, you'll just cross out one of your hourglasses on your sheet. We need to try to finish this dungeon before the hourglasses all go out. And I did say that on the reverse side, there would be a more difficult version of the quest. All I can really tell is that when you flip this over, the number of hourglasses decreases by 1. So I think that's probably more involved, more elaborate than that, but that is the only difference that I've been able to find after studying this card. So yeah, getting that additional turn is definitely helping you win. And of course, you could make your own dungeon cards, and you could make your own hero sheets once you get really involved. You could even make your own dungeons for your own homebrew experiences. I don't know why I said dungeons. You can even make your own monsters for your homebrew experience. So wiping off the dry erase card with my hand like a barbarian when I've been provided with not one, but 4 erasers. You guys know me. I play the bonk build, therefore I bonk everything. I want to go through and show you just a few more of the monsters. I do really think the art is charming. I also wanted to show you that there are special conditions for battling the monster in the lower right-hand corner. In this case, if you have done damage to the monster's wing, in other words, if there's any intercepting lines on the wing of this monster, he's actually going to deal more damage. Whatever the die result was in the monster's turn phase, you're going to add 2 to it. So if you rolled a 1, and yeah, after you get to the monster phase, you actually do re-roll the die. In this case, we'll say it was a black die, and that's a terrible roll to get right there. We'll roll it again. Wow, double 6s. We'll roll it again. Wow, triple 6s. That's not good. We'll roll it again. 5. Let's say I rolled a 2. By default, on a black die, a 2 is going to cause 1 wound to our hero, but if I take out this monster's left wing, that's going to add 2 to the result, meaning it'll be a 4, which now means 2 damage to our hero. And if I take out the right wing on this monster, it'll be the same way. This monster is also quite different mechanically. For each line that we break chains with, we will have an additional damage done to our hero. And that makes sense because this monster is chained to the wall. So if it's got some freedom, it's going to be hurting us. You'd think it would give us a break. Like if we break all of its chains and we don't hurt it, it'll run away. Maybe that would be some good homebrew. We've got a pair of skeletons here. There are actually 2 enemies to worry about, and they each have their own health tracks. And the special skill here is for each skull, which here are the skulls representing the enemies, for each enemy that is alive, this combat phase actually goes for that many times. So if we have 2 skeletons, we're going to actually roll 2 dice of whichever color the combat phase ends up being from the die that you drafted. So if you drafted a white die and you rolled it and that's a 3, you're going to roll it again for the second skeleton, and his is going to be a 6. Of course, why wouldn't it be? So then the first skeleton is going to cause 1 broken heart, and the second skeleton is going to cause, well, 1 broken heart. That's not too bad. That's before we apply any damage bonuses or torch debuffs or anything like that. Now, if you thought that was creative, the boss monsters are where this gets really creative. This is a beholder kind of monster, and it's got a lot of heads. It's got 1 head. It's got a lot of eyeballs, though. It's got 7 eyes, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, plus its head. Its head has 4 points of health, and then each of its eyes has its own single health. But there are letters in each of the bits of health, and for each letter that exists on this monster, that will determine what kind of damage the monster will do to you. So in this particular case, no matter if the die is white or black, if at the end of your turn you have A's, B's, and C's on this monster, it'll be able to damage you no matter what. So if you had drafted a white die, again in my example is always the white die, and you rolled a 3, then all of the B's would be able to damage you, all the B's that were left. And in this case, there are 4 of those. By contrast, there are only 3 C's, so it's weird that the higher number means actually less damage, but I guess it does work out that way sometimes. Really, this is just scratching the surface of what will be available. So the last thing I wanted to point out is that the white die sections and the black die sections are different because the white dice won't allow you to move as quickly through the dungeon, but they provide you on average better opportunity for attacking the monster, and they provide the monster with less opportunity to attack you back or attack you with weaker attacks. And the black dice allow you to move much quicker into the dungeon, but allow you slightly disadvantaged attacks. I think this is really based on like an average weight of what kinds of circle to circle is going to damage the monster. I wouldn't pay too much attention to this middle circle unless there is a real strategy going on here that is above my head so far. But the black die being given to the monster during the monster attack phase is the real threat on this side of things. And whatever die you choose, that's going to determine your hero movement, what you attack, and how the monster attacks back all together. So you're just choosing 1 die to influence all 3 of those phases, which means that you have the capability of strategizing by picking the die that you want. Now in a single player game, when you pick up a die, you're going to eliminate one of the other dice of the same or greater value. Usually that's going to be a black die, and the rules do call out for removing an additional black die. But this is not a how to play video, although we did get into a lot of the rules and how to play. So the nuances are really in the details here. Like I said earlier, the rule book is very cleanly laid out. I learned a lot in the short time it took me to go through the rules. There's only 12 pages as of the time of recording this video, and they're intuitive, they're elegant. The very few times I got hung up on something, all I had to do was go back and reference, and I found the information I needed easily. So this is really well done, and I really appreciate a good rule book. To me, that can really hurt or help a game master's experience. And so, that's my presentation of Dungeons of the Oak Dell. There are many more monsters to discover, but I will encourage you to go visit the campaign link in the description below and check that out. And a huge thank you again to Michael and the folks at Two Acorns Games for sending me this beautiful prototype. I'm going to have a lot of fun continuing to play this, and I have a feeling you'll see it again on the channel. So, Brave Heroes, comment anything you'd like down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your day, and bye for now.